TJ Stone, a spiritual director and life coach, and this is a short collection of some of my videos that I like to share about love, life, spirituality, business, just how to navigate your own hero's journey. So basically, this is everything I think would be helpful to know about your own hero's journey as it relates to all those topics in roughly 16 and a half minutes. Enjoy. The opposite of love is not hate or even fear. You see, love is an action. It's the most active and giving thing you can do, giving up yourself to another person. Now, the opposite of love is apathy, indifference, which is the lack of action or care. The damage apathy can do to a person, both the giver of it and the receiver of it, is immeasurable. Love is the most important thing in this life and beyond. Is the creative force of love that we are all born from, and we spend the rest of our lives on this earth trying to just reach for whatever small slivers of that love we can find, knowing nothing in this life will come close to perfect universal love. In our attempts to seek love outside of ourselves, we can rob ourselves of peace, joy, and personal fulfillment in a never-ending search for something that we can't find outside of our own hearts. No, my friends, the most important and greatest source of love is within ourselves. We must first learn to love all of the inner parts of ourselves if we ever hope to be able to give and receive unconditional love. Love has to start from within yourself, not just as an action, but as a knowing and a being. You have to learn to love yourself first in a deep and profound way, giving grace to yourself for all your faults unconditionally. Unconditional love starts with yourself and then explodes outward because our physical bodies can't contain true unconditional love. So it logically has to spill over into our lives and out to everyone we encounter. One of the greatest lies of identity is that we are what we do, and that's only made worse by comparison to others. But people are more than a job, and comparison is the enemy of joy. The lie of identity number 2 is that I am what I have, basing my value on my possessions, my net worth. But that not only devalues ourselves, but all human life. Our true identity comes from within. The third lie of identity is that I am what others say about me. This hands over our own freedom and human agency to others' opinions. We are more than what others say about us. One of the greatest lies of identity is thinking that I am nothing more than my worst moment. This allows the voice of our internal self-critic to take the wheel and drive our lives. If you're stuck in a pattern of replaying your worst moments, seeking a good therapist could help. But you can also change your narrative. Don't let your worst moment be your defining moment. Take every worst moment as a teachable moment to learn from and propel you forward. One of the greatest lies of identity is thinking that I am my best moment. When we let even a good moment in our life define us and become our identity, we are still living into a false self and false narrative that we can never live up to and limits our own potential. It only suppresses our true selves when we idolize a single moment of realized potential and keeps a lifetime worth of unrealized potential locked up inside. Our false selves are the identities that we cultivate in order to function in society. Some people call this the ego. It's not who we really are, though. You see, our true selves are a much deeper mystery. Most people in our modern civilization are taught to cultivate and nurture the false self and totally ignore the true self. That's the greatest irony of human existence, because the more we make of ourselves, the less we actually exist. If we truly believe in our hearts that this false ego self that we build and cultivate and nurture for ourselves to protect us from the outside world is our true self, then we'll spend the rest of our lives thinking that the mask that we wear is our true self, and we'll do anything to protect it, even harming our true self. From the moment that we're born with a false self covering, like an invisible suit, covering over our true selves, our real identity. And really, the journey of life is to gradually become aware of this false self so that we might see it as something separate from ourselves and gradually reveal our true self and our true nature underneath. Your experience of your life is very much tied to the type of story that you're telling yourself at any given time. If you read Joseph Campbell and the mythology of storytelling, we've all been telling only a handful of stories since the dawn of time. But what's more important is your role in that story. Are you the victim in your story? Are you the hero of your story? Are you the villain? The good thing is, you can always change your story. Your inner self is as secret and mysterious as God, and like God, every concept that tries to define it or understand it falls short. It is a life that can't be studied or held because it is not a thing, but a presence we can experience anytime we want if we just quiet our minds, still our bodies, and get in tune with that beingness that is ever present with ourselves. Your inner self is an invitation to being fully present in your own life and body. Alienation begins when culture divides me against myself, puts a mask on me, gives me a role I may or may not want to play. Alienation is complete when I become completely identified with my mask, totally satisfied with my role, and convince myself that any other identity or role is inconceivable. If you find yourself sweating under your mask or in a role that makes you itch a little bit, then you're already on the path to being free. Suffering and failure happen to everyone. It doesn't matter who you are or how good you are. It's just a part of this life. It's baked into it. It's actually a good and necessary part of the human experience. When we try to avoid failure, we often can make our experience worse because we're fighting an ultimately losing battle, fighting against the current of life. So learn to be comfortable swimming in failure, and you will lessen the time between your cycles of success and failure, which are just a natural rhythm to life, like the falling and rising tides. Guilt is when you know you have done something wrong that goes against your own conscience. It is actually a healthy thing in and of itself that can help us to realign with our higher selves and our own personal values when we lean into it. When we lean away from guilt and let it fester, it can turn into shame. Shame is guilt inverted, and when left untreated, it can turn into toxic shame. The energy of toxic shame drives us further and further away from alignment with our higher nature and our conscience. The longer we allow shame to sit and become toxic to our identity and our own self-image, the harder it is to reclaim a healthy self-image and step into our higher nature. Toxic shame messes up your entire concept of yourself and filters every experience you have through a distorted lens. When you throw a failure into that distorted lens, it takes what could have been a good teachable lesson and an isolated thing that happened that has nothing to do with your self-worth and distorts it into, I am a failure. I failed at this because this is my nature as a person, to fail. Failure starts to become an essential part of your identity, and because the way you see yourself in the world, because of the effects of shame, has been so distorted, you start to see everything in a way that proves the lie to be true in your eyes, which creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you take on the identity of a failure, then you subconsciously brainwash yourself into not only believing it's true, but making your actions prove that it's true. The only way to break the toxic shame spiral is by counteracting it with radical self-love and acceptance. Most people, societies, and even institutions seem to be primarily preoccupied with things that would be categorized as the first half of life. The first half of life mostly consists of defining the container of oneself by determining what we are not and drawing safe boundaries around that until what it is that we are starts to take shape and reveal itself. However, most people in our modern society take the entirety of their lives now to do this instead of just the first half of their life. If the first half of life is primarily concerned with defining your container, then the second half of life is mostly concerned with finding those important contents that your container was made to hold. Most of us treat our lives like we are building a house, but spend all of our time on the basement and foundation, never bothering to think we might need to build an upstairs with a living room, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom to sustain us. Our mindset is usually so fixed on surviving that thriving never even occurs to us. We live our entire lives in this fortified basement waiting for the storms to come and are totally oblivious to the fact that the storms came and went, and we're still holed up in the basement without a more comfortable space to retreat to. We become complacent with living our entire lives in a state that becomes familiar, even if it is uncomfortable, because the discomfort that we don't know is scarier than the discomfort that we're used to. Most of us never venture into the second half of life because we get too familiar with being in the first half of life. We mistake feeling familiar for feeling safe or fulfilling, even when it is uncomfortable. In fact, for most of us, some outside force usually has to act on us in order to make it less comfortable not to enter into the second half of our life, rather than stay in the discomfort of the familiar first half of life. In this way, the way up is actually by going down. Like all things in life, we have to fall before we can rise. Spiritually speaking, all the best lessons are learned through facing adversity and surviving, not by sitting still in a relative discomfort. Growth hurts. That's why they call it growing pains. But I believe we are all made to grow into that second half of life where we can meet adversity and become friends with it. If you want to be an innovator, you need to know this equation. Curiosity plus creativity plus action equals innovation. It's not enough just to have an idea or be curious about doing something. That curiosity has to simmer and lead to some creative, actionable plan. And the most important part is putting that plan into action, because an idea without action is just an idea. Richard Rohr says falling upward is a secret of the soul, known not by thinking about it or proving it, but only by risking it at least once and by allowing yourself to be led at least once. Those who have allowed it know it is true, but only after the fact. What is it that is getting in between you and the you that you want to be? Whatever it is most likely a limiting belief. I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I don't have a degree in this, I was just born this way, I'm not athletic enough, maybe it's just my genetics, that's who I am, I could never learn how to do that. We all have them. Whatever the dominant ones are for you, you can shut them down by just saying out loud to yourself the opposite of that limiting belief. Instead of, I'm not good enough, I am good enough. Instead of, I'll never learn how to do that, I will learn how to do that. As silly as it may sound and seem, even when you start doing it, it's amazing how much it can rewire our brains, because our words have power. And you can speak words of life over yourself or words of destruction over yourself. The choice is always yours. Hitting a wall in your life is not a failure in your life, but a certainty and a rite of passage in some ways. You are going to hit walls, and once you get through them, there will certainly be new ones to come. It's just part of the spiritual journey of life. We learn the most through adversity. Whatever your wall is right now, learn to make peace with it. Appreciate it for what it is, an invitation to either let go of something you've held on to for too long, move beyond something, forgive someone or perhaps yourself, or to surrender. These things are usually the ways we get through our walls. Often surrender to the truth of the moment is the only way to win. Mahatma Gandhi once said, "Freedom is not worth having if it does not include the freedom to make mistakes." We need to give ourselves the freedom to fail and learn from our mistakes, because that's a big part of why we're here in this life. To learn by first doing it wrong and then adjusting and pivoting based on what we learn. That is our soul's journey, to keep failing upwards. Are you giving yourself the freedom to fail? Often in life we are presented with a crisis, a problem that we must address immediately. Usually we take this as an inconvenience and a discomfort to deal with. However, every crisis is an opportunity to step more fully into who we are and what we are made and called to do. In moments of crisis, instead of asking, why? As in, why is this happening to me? Perhaps we would be better off asking, what? What is the opportunity in this moment to embrace all that I'm called to be and step into it one step closer. Most people think that the journey of life is to find the answers that are meaningful and relevant to you and your life path. However, that misses the point entirely. Having been a teacher myself before, I know that no one really truly learns the lessons they need to by being given the answers, at least not in a meaningful and lasting way. No, the real journey of life is to be able to live in the tension that lies between having the questions and being able to hold them open-handedly, letting the answers that you need reveal themselves to you in their own time. The quest lies in the questions. Your higher self already knows exactly what you need to do in your life. We're just not usually tuned into it. What keeps us from listening is usually negative self-talk, either in our own voice or in what we imagine the voices of those we give power to speak into our lives may say. This is what creates paralysis and discomfort, because we now have to live in the tension of the discomfort of knowing what we need to do, but feeling like it is impossible to do. Some of us lived there our entire lives. However, all we need to do to break out of this paralysis is either choose not to listen to the negative self-talk or drown it out with even more positive self-talk. This will feel unnatural at first because you don't yet realize that the majority of your self-talk is probably already negative. You can ignore it or drown it or be drowned by it, but the choice is always yours.